Tyler, how you doing, man?
Winston, what's up, bud? Another week, another deal.
Yeah, we're trying to find them. If we keep looking, we will find them. That's kind of the strategy here, right?
Yeah.
So, all right, well, great. Happy to have you. And sorry, I'm having an issue here. Happy to have you here for another week of the underwriting of a single tenant net lease type deal. Today we got AFC urgent care. So let's talk a little bit about the location, Tyler, and then we'll talk about AFC a little bit.
Awesome. Yeah, so this one's in Spring Hill, your backyard. I think there's a piece of land right next to it that I think you know very well, if I'm not mistaken. This is right off Main Street in Spring Hill, between Main Street and Wall Street there on that main strip. Just huge retail strip, Captain D's, Chipotle, etc., up and down, Walmart across the street. So this AFC, American Family Care, they've been there, I think, at least started in 2014. Great piece of real estate, obviously currently being used for an urgent care. It's just a little bit over an acre tract. The building's close to 5,000 square feet. So if it wasn't an urgent care, it could be basically anything on that piece of land. Is there anything in particular with Spring Hill you'd like to talk about?
I'm a huge fan of Spring Hill. We've got a project going through planning and zoning right now to get approved. But yeah, Spring Hill's a great community. In right outside of Nashville, we'll call it about 30 minutes outside of Nashville. And it's a really fast growing area. So it's a great market. A lot of families live there. Pretty high income area. Household income, I want to say, is 135,000 plus. So it's a good market.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really good market. So I definitely think the market itself is really good and worth digging into.
Yeah, let me just share my screen here so people can.
Yep, sorry. Let me add that to the screen.
Like I was saying, right?
It's loading.
So this is Columbia Pike that runs right down. Okay. So can you see me? Can you see the map now?
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah. So this is Columbia Pike that runs right down through Spring Hill. Huge retail corridor, as we were talking about. This is the plot right here with this Walmart across the street, and you have Taco Bell, etc., up and down the street. And then just to give you a bird's eye view of Spring Hill, as Winston was saying, fast growing area. Spring Hill is just southwest of Nashville, so it's out of Nashville, and then you'll have Franklin up here and the rest of Nashville. AFC. So AFC, you've done a lot of work with urgent cares. My research on them is they're pretty big. I think 300 plus location. You have anything in particular with AFC you want to talk about?
AFC is a pretty decent sized urgent care. I think they're in like 30 states, over 300 locations. I started doing urgent care, site selection development probably 7 years ago. And, I would see them in kind of a little bit larger markets. And by larger, I mean not that smaller. Not that. Hey, Tyler, will you mute for a second here?
Yep.
I would see them at kind of, in a little bit larger markets than we were going into. But, towns like Spring Hill, I believe they're a franchise actually. So that's one thing that makes them unique is that they're a franchise and they're not actually, just a single operator, right? They're not just owned by one group that owns 300 plus. They do have some strong operators, some folks that own 30, 40, 50 clinics kind of that franchise. So I don't know much about them operationally, but my understanding is they're pretty strong. They are a strong brand.
Yeah. So So let's talk a little bit about the lease, right? So they've been there since 2014. That's when the building was built. Nearly 5,000 square feet. It's a little bit big for urgent care, no? 4,700.
Yeah. It seems. They built this. No. It looks like they built this. The original term was 20 years, right? And so, they've been there for a little over 8 years. When I first started doing this, we were building right at about 4,000 square feet. Today, the urgent cares that we're building are a little over 3,000 square feet, right? So people have been able to, brands have been able to kind of condense their footprint. So I would imagine, I don't know this for a fact, but I would imagine a new prototype of AFC would be a little bit smaller, but I don't know that for a fact. It's a little bit larger, but it's fine.
Yeah. So this lease, I mean, pretty standard 20-year initial term, 4 or 5 year options. They're asking a 5.5 cap on this. So it's a bit, before we even get to the cash flows, I mean, I think we can look at, comparable sales. So they're asking a 5.5 cap on 11 years left on the lease. These are single tenant net lease medical office sales for the last 2 months. So you can see they're kind of all over the place, everywhere from 8.5 down to 4.5 caps. But you can also see that this one at a 5.5 cap, they are asking, a premium on their price. It's significantly below the trend line that you'd see here for remaining term versus closing cap rate. So I think we looked at an urgent team asset a few weeks ago, and they were asking a 6 cap. So, and I believe that was also a good market. It was Hoover, Alabama. Probably not quite as good as Spring Hill, but I wouldn't expect it to justify 50 basis points difference just on the difference in the markets. So, 5.5 cap on this, what they're asking just to look at sales comparables seems a bit expensive. I don't know if, recently, Winston, I mean, these urgent cares have been going in the market for what? And are these still going in the mid 5s? Are they up in the 6s, low 6s?
I would say mid 6s.
Mid 6s
are kind of where a lot of them are being offloaded. And I disagree with one thing you said. You had mentioned a 50 basis point difference. You got to remember there are markets that are more desirable, if you will, than others. And Tennessee, especially in the Nashville area, is a desirable market today. And oftentimes you can see cap rates condense in kind of sexier markets, right? So I'm not surprised to see this one priced differently. But I do think it's being a little aggressive for what it's offering. The one question that we don't know here is who is this operator? Is their operator well funded? Do they just own 1 or 2 clinics? And who is a guarantor, right? And that's what's really going to drive the value here. Isn't so much the use, but how solid is the operator and the guarantor of this urgent care?
I could be wrong. I thought this was guaranteed by, this was a corporate guarantee. I didn't think this was a franchisee.
Oh, really? Well, if it's corporate, yeah, that's fantastic. I didn't catch that. I don't see that on my cheat sheet here, so I did not catch that. But if it's corporate owned, I think that's fantastic, and that definitely drives the cap rate down some versus if it was just like a leasee, typically. And so I think they're a little aggressive.
Yeah, no, for sure.
On the pricing, but I'm not surprised.
All right, so in the urgent care space, this is kind of a typical lease, 5.5 cap, 220,000 NOI. Some of these are bigger, smaller, but it's a pretty reasonable NOI. So they're asking nearly $4 million for this building. If you look at the lease structure, so this is an interesting, the rent bumps. I really like to dig into rent bumps because I think a lot of people don't look as closely at rent bumps, then they really matter. The rent bumps on this lease are weird. They're not like a standard 2% a year, 10% every 5 years, or what you normally have. The way it's set up is they'll give you CPI. They'll give you, 1.25x CPI as a rent bump, which would sound amazing, but they cap it at 1.75% a year. So as far as I'm concerned, it's just a marketing trick, because CPI is never going to be below 1.75% a year. So they might as well have just told you, it's 1.75% a year. But what they're trying to sell you on is, this will, this lease will keep up with inflation, when actually it won't, because inflation is going to be 6-7% maybe, and they're giving you 1.75. So you can pretty much just ignore the CPI thing that is being marketed, and just assume that you're always going to get 1.75%, which isn't great. I mean, it's a little bit worse. 1.75% will be a little bit worse than a 10% bump every 5 years. So it's okay, but it's not as good as 2% a year, or even 10% every 5 years. So here, standard stuff, we've got about a 5% capital reserve in place, even though this is an absolute triple net lease. 1% closing fees. And then on disposition, we're looking at year 11 disposition. So we're going to underwrite this as if we were going to dispose of it, when the lease is up in year 11. So, 2 options for disposition is the tenant renews. The second option is an adaptive reuse. So tenant renews is pretty straightforward. Typically, the way we'll underwrite this is we'll add 5 basis points a year every year that's passed from now until the time you dispose. That's because you've on a renewal instead of a new lease. You have an older building. You're probably gonna have more maintenance. The market's just going to price it a little bit more cheaply with a little bit of a higher cap rate. What's usually more important, or what's usually more interesting, is how you underwrite the adaptive reuse. So this one, I'm actually underwriting this at. In this case, I've actually got, you might disagree with Winston, I've got the net proceeds of the adaptive reuse as higher than the renewal. And I'm doing that because, one, we've discussed this real estate before. It's fantastic real estate, fantastic market. And this is on a prime retail corridor with, a 5,000 square foot building with an acre of land. I mean, you could do pretty much anything you want with that. So I'm assuming that you could exit this thing at a 5.5 cap, assuming you were going in at a 5.5 cap. I'm not discounting the time at all on the exit cap rate. I don't know what you think about that.
I think you're being a little aggressive, but that's okay.
Good. We disagree finally.
Finally.
What would you underwrite this at? The tenant leaves adaptive reuse scenario.
It's going to totally be who retenants it, right? So it's really hard to know. If the tenant's leaving and you're just getting kind of a non-credit tenant that comes in, maybe they're not corporate guaranteed, it's just kind of a local mom and pop, well, the cap rate's going to go up. It's going to greatly reduce, right? But if you have maybe a strong regional urgent care that comes in, takes it over, maybe a hospital-based urgent care that comes in, takes it over, that could reduce it. So it's really tough, man. And so, it's okay you leaving it at a 5.5. I don't believe that it's worth a 5.5 today, personally. That's why I'm balking at that. But hey, let me stop talking.
Well, let's stay there for a second though. So I also don't believe it's worth a 5.5 today. But so if we were to underwrite this at, say, a 6, we would probably move this up to a 6.65 and this to a 6. Would you be more okay with that? Are you not okay with it because it's a 5.5, or are you not okay with it because it's the same cap rate that they're going in at today?
I'm 5.5. That's the only reason why. I just don't believe that it's worth 5.5 today. But if you retenant this with a large urgent care provider in 11 years, right, it very well may be worth a 5 cap. No one knows, but today, that's my position.
And how do you think a mom and pop tenant versus forgetting the cap rate for a second, a mom and pop tenant versus, let's say, a large franchise tenant would affect the NOI? Do you think it would be reasonably the same, or you think there'd be a large difference there?
I think the NOI is going to stay the same, but what's going to drive it is the is the guarantor of the lease. So if a mom and pop only has one or two, if something happens, if pop gets sick or somebody loses a license, there's a fire in one of their whatever it is, they don't have the operations, they don't have the stores or the clinics to kind of help out the others, right? So they're going to be really hurt by losing one store. Whereas if it's a client that's got 100 units or 50 units, right? I mean, those other good units, good clinics can really help out in times of need. So that's the issue. It's really, cap rate isn't just the who the tenant is or how good the real estate is. It's how good is the paper, right? How good is the tenant's ability to pay, right? That's what it is. How good is a tenant in paying its bills? That's really it.
Perfect. I put it up to 575 there just to keep you happy. So
all right, we meet in the middle.
I won't be so aggressive. All right, so let's look at this first with the price that they're asking, right? So unlevered IRR and levered IRR, right? So they're asking, at the price they're asking, this is going to give you a 5.85 unlevered IRR. And then if you put debt on it at the rates we're seeing today, it's going to bring you down under 5%. So not fantastic returns, especially the leverage returns at a 5.5 cap. I think we kind of discussed, already. We think it's a bit aggressive. Maybe we can move down and try some scenarios where, we use a cap rate that we think makes more sense. So you were saying you think most of these are selling in the mid sixes now? These urgent cares?
It's market dependent. So like Texas, Tennessee, Florida, still very desirable markets. And so, you could see this maybe go to a trade, I think, at a 6.25, but I don't think you're going to see a trade sub 6.
Okay. Well, so with the discounts I put on both the income and disposition cash flows, I left them the same this time because I think the disposition, normally the disposition cash flows, I discount more than the income cash flows. But in this case, again, the property's great. I'd discount them both basically at the same discount rate. That would, if we discounted both at 7.5%, that would get us in at a buying in at a 6.28 cap rate, right? Which would probably be a reasonable purchase price in this market, right? So if you come in at a 6.28 cap, right, you're getting in for $3.5 million bucks. All of a sudden your returns are a little bit better, right? So your unlevered return is a 7.5 IRR, and your levered is basically the same. So you're actually you're almost neutral leverage, right? So no matter how much you lever up or lever down, you can see it doesn't really change. Well, change your cash flows, but it doesn't change so much your levered IRR. It stays pretty close to the unlevered, and that's because the return on the asset is almost identical to the cost of your debt. So you would just put as much leverage on this as you wanted to or needed to, and whether or not you want to eat negative cash flows during the term or not. What do you think about that 7.5% return? If you come in at a 6.28, you think that's a good deal?
I think a good deal for me is different from you. Not to dodge the question, but I don't think it's bad. Personally, I don't think anyone should eat negative cash flows unless you're doing something like you have a need for that. I'm never going to recommend doing it and holding off for 11 years to see a payday. I'm never going to recommend that to any client. But there are use cases where it's reasonable and it makes sense. So 7.5% return isn't bad.
We always disagree on cash flows. I'm fully okay with negative cash flows in one property if it makes sense if the returns make sense and that property makes sense within the context of an entire portfolio. Because just because you're negative cash flow on this one, if it's your only property, maybe, but maybe you have like 50, and
yeah, and I think
and you can meet your liquidity needs in other places, right?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're looking at it from a portfolio standpoint, yeah, I don't disagree with you. There may be a need for this, but if you're looking at this property, which is I feel like what we're looking at, then I'm not going to recommend negative cash flows as just a general rule, but there's always an exception to the rule, right? But can you go buy? I mean, what are T-bills going for today? You know what I mean? So what's a 10-year treasury, right? What is that going for? I mean, it does the
10-year
benefits of
treasury.
owning commercial real estate, does that outweigh what we can get, on a 10-year T-bill, right? So it all matters.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. And if you compare, these rates, you can get double B bonds that'll give you pretty much the same return as this, right? So again, commercial real estate always has to be evaluated, in terms of other benefits as well, tax benefits, where it fits as far as diversity in portfolio. Because a lot of times when you compare these assets to other assets straight up one-on-one, as if you could only have one, it doesn't compare that well, right? There's other assets out there that maybe if you want to put all your eggs in one basket, it probably wouldn't be a AFC urgent care in Spring Hill. But in the context of I have this asset, maybe I have some fixed income, maybe I have equity, I have some other stuff. It can make a lot of sense. And if it's a positive cash flow, if that's what you want, as far as you have your liquidity needs, or whether it's a total return on the end, commercial real estate has its place. So
Excellent.
Anything else on this one?
No, I don't have anything for it. I think it's good. Do you still have that pulled up? Do you still have the location pulled up, Tyler?
Yeah, let me grab it.
Well, I might as well do a plug for if you go into the site where we're developing, you know where we are, Tyler?
Right here, no?
If anyone is looking or watching this and interested on an upcoming medical office, I can disclose it because it's public knowledge. It is an autism clinic that we are putting right next to. You see the Arise Therapies over there, Tyler? Just around the corner, just to the north by Arise Therapies, off O'Halloran Drive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There.
Yeah, right there. So we're developing.
We've studied this area.
That's a 4.1 acre track, and we'll turn that into 3 tracks. And we're developing one now that is going to be an autism clinic. So we're excited. We were supposed to get some good news yesterday, but we decided to defer until the next meeting. So still working on it, but it's coming along and should be in the pipeline soon. All right, Tyler.
We'll be valuing this autism clinic next year on episode 64.
Yeah, man. All right. Well, hey, thanks, Tyler. Appreciate it. If anyone's interested in learning more, reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you, whether it's about what we discussed today, the autism clinic we just talked about, or just kind of mentioned, or just real estate in general. Give us a shout. Yeah.
Cheers, Winston.
See you, brother. Bye.